Welcome to Strange Dimensions. The interface to alternate realities. Contact experiences. And mysterious phenomena. And now your host for Strange Dimensions Radio. Here's Rosemary Ellen Guiley.
Good evening, everyone. So glad to be back with you for another show of Strange Dimensions. Got a great program for you tonight. Hope everything is all good and well with you out there. Well, today I've been up to my ears in packing boxes because I'm getting ready for my first big trip of the spring season, which is the Victory of Light Expo in Cincinnati this coming Saturday and Sunday. It's going to be at the Sharonville Conference Center. Joe and I go every year, and it gets bigger and bigger every year. It's an absolutely fabulous event. So if you are in the area, do come by. I'm giving a workshop on Saturday on shadow people, the jinn, and some remedies that can be applied for persistent problems. On Sunday, I have a lecture on contact experiences and Kundalini, how our contact experiences with other beings and spirits are putting humanity on a fast-forward track of Kundalini awakening and what that means for us individually and for humanity as a whole. So that's definitely one to catch. Now, tomorrow my newsletter goes out, Strange Dimensions, and it's a free newsletter I put out every month. You can still get on the subscription list tonight. Just go to my website, visionaryliving.com. There's a form to fill out on the homepage. The newsletter features questions from readers, articles that I've been writing in conjunction with my books, news about what I'm doing. You can join the thousands of people who are on the list and get Strange Dimensions every month. Well, tonight we're going to be exploring the spiritual realms. And boy, we've got a lot of territory to cover. I have an absolutely fascinating guest lined up for you. Now, when we explore the spirit realms, and especially in astral travel, going out of body, we're really beyond time and space. So we can access all kinds of realities. We can even go back to the past on Earth. Have you ever wanted to have a conversation with someone from a long ago past? Maybe a historical figure or a religious figure, even gods and goddesses. How about talking to some alien beings? How about even talking to the planet itself? How about checking out the Akashic records, the afterlife, see some of your past lives? Get some insight into some of the big eternal questions that humanity has been pondering since the very beginning of our existence. Well, I've certainly wanted to do all of those things, and I've accomplished some of them. But my guest tonight, Garnet Schulhauser, has done all of them. So I tell you, we're in for a fascinating show tonight. So let me introduce Garnet Schulhauser. He's a retired lawyer who lives near Victoria on Vancouver Island in British Columbia. He grew up on a small farm in Saskatchewan and got a law degree, practiced corporate law with blue-chip law firms for over 30 years in Calgary, and retired in 2008. But before he retired, he had a life-changing event, a street encounter with what at first seemed to be a homeless man who proved to be something much more. And this really launched an incredible astral traveling spiritual journey into all kinds of areas, topics, and other dimensions. His discoveries and revelations are published in 3 books so far, and I say so far because I'm sure more are coming. We have Dancing on a Stamp, Dancing Forever with Spirit, and Dance of Heavenly Bliss. That's the new one. Garnet has had encounters with Gaia, the consciousness of the earth, Sasquatch, an Irish fairy, Moses, Jesus, Lucifer, Mary, Athena, a host of other figures, including higher beings and other planes. He's visited the spirit side, the Akashic records, other planets, a fascinating place called New Earth that I want to learn more about. And he even got to drop in on an event that has been talked about endlessly in ufology, the 1947 crash at Roswell. Definitely want to find out his perspective on what went on there. So Garnet has a lot to share about what he's learned, some revelations for us about the spirit world, reincarnation, heaven, and more. He keeps a very active schedule of media appearances and conferences. He's been all over the United States. His website, garnetschulhauser.com. Well, welcome, Garnet. Thank you for being with me tonight.
Well, thank you for inviting me, Rosemary. I'm delighted to be on your show.
Now, when you were pursuing your law career, did you have an interest in these topics, or was your encounter in 2007 a starting point for you?
It was a major transformation point. When I was in law school, I wasn't thinking about anything other than learning the law. I'd been raised as a Roman Catholic, and so by the time I hit law school, I had cast aside a lot of the beliefs and rules that I'd been taught as a child. So I was in no man's land, casting about for a new paradigm to latch onto. And I constantly asked myself the eternal questions of life, like, who am I? Why am I here? What's my life purpose? And what happens to me when I die? And so I did begin searching for something else, a new belief system. And then eventually it all sort of came together in one sort of big rush when I met my spirit guide, Albert, in 2007.
So this was a rather strange encounter. He sounds like kind of a bum at first. And what happened?
Well, I was still practicing law, and I was strolling down the street one sunny afternoon in May when all of a sudden, seemingly out of nowhere, a homeless man just jumped in front of me. And he looked like a typical homeless man with long stringy hair and a scraggly beard and dirty slept-in clothes. But there was something very different about this man. He had these amazing, dazzling, sparkling blue eyes that shone like two little blue stars. And he seemed to be penetrating, looking deep within me, right down to the depths of my soul. And I sensed that he knew everything about me, everything I'd ever said or done in my life, which was strange because I'd never met this man before. But I didn't feel violated because at the same time, his eyes were sending me this wave of pure, unconditional love that was infusing my whole body with an amazing sense of peace, security, and well-being. So I was like a deer caught in the headlights. I just stood there, basking in the loving glow from this man's eyes. And then finally he broke the spell by saying, "Why are you here?" And then he promptly disappeared into a nearby store. And when I finally collected my wits, I decided I'd better go in there and try to find this man and find out who he was. So I went into the store, walked up and down the aisles. He was nowhere to be seen. I went back out on the street and walked up and down for several blocks trying to spot him, but he had seemingly disappeared into thin air. So when I walked back to my office, I resolved that I was going to return the next day to try to find this man. And so I did. Next day, very same time, very same street, I began to search for this homeless man. So I searched for 15 or 20 minutes and I was about to give up when I spotted him sitting all alone on a bench. So I walked up to him and I said, "Who are you and why did you stop me the other day?" And he said, "I'm a soul just like you. I'm here to help you on your journey and answer your questions." And then my skeptical lawyer brain kicked in, Rosemary, and I said to him, "Why do you think you can help me when you can't even help yourself? Because you look like you've been sleeping on the street for weeks and you smell like a dead fish." Well, he just gave me a big smile and he said, "Looks can be deceiving because you look like you're a successful lawyer with everything under control, but we both know that's just a facade. So you can turn around and head back to your office and see if you can find the answers you've been seeking all these years on all those emails waiting for you on your computer, or you can sit down and have a chat with me." So luckily my intuition kicked in. And I sat down and began a conversation with this man, which went off and on for the next several months. I found out that he was really one of my spirit guides in disguise, and that I was the only one who could see him and touch him in physical form. So he would be invisible to anyone else who had been passing on the street that day. And so he answered all my questions and many others and gave me some very startling revelations about life, death, God, the afterlife, and so on. And then he surprised me early on in the conversation by saying, "I'm not just here to satisfy your curiosity. I want you to write a book about the revelations I have given you and will give you in the future." which really took me by surprise because I'd never even dreamed of writing a book before. And so that was the beginning of my encounter with Albert. And the first book that I wrote, Dancing on a Stamp, discloses the dialogue I had, the question and answer, with my spirit guide, who proved to be a very wise and compassionate and loving spirit.
Your description of him with the startling eyes, these crystal clear blue eyes, I find that so often in angel encounters. And this is an indication of some sort of otherworldly presence. And I've heard of some other encounters, too, where the guide figure is something that really jolts us, not what we expect, not something that's going to come down a beam of light in golden robes and a golden belt on, but something that's really going to shake us up from wherever we're at. And it sounds like he really gave you a zinger there.
Yeah, he certainly did give me a zinger because it was totally unexpected and coming from a source that I would never have dreamed it would have come from, because I had encountered homeless people on the street before, and I would typically do a quick sidestep and go around them, totally ignore them. My head was in the clouds, and I would often think about homeless people. What's wrong with you? Why don't you get a job like the rest of us and quit being a bum, kind of thing. That was my attitude. He totally turned me around on that one, obviously, and so it was like he hit me over the head with a 2x4 to get my attention, and it worked very well.
But he wasn't entirely a spirit. Wasn't he previously incarnated on Earth?
Yes, he and I had previous incarnations on Earth. He described 2 or 3 of them to me just briefly, saying that, yes, we've been together before. Only this time, when I incarnated, I had asked him to be my spirit guide, so he remained on the spirit side to be one of my coaches, one of my spirit guides. And so we had a long history of which I remembered none of it, because once you sort of pass through the fog of amnesia, when you're incarnated, you forget all that stuff. But he said, yeah, we've been around on a few movies together before, and this time he was my spirit guide.
So how did these astral journeys then begin, and what did that feel like?
Well, it was really quite a very different feeling. How it happened was that I woke up in my bedroom in my bed one night, and I could see this ghost-like ethereal figure standing in the doorway of my bedroom, which kind of startled me. As it moved closer towards the foot of my bed, I could see it was my old friend Albert, but he was in astral form. And I said, Albert, what brings you here? And he said, well, I'm here now to take you on another set of encounters with me. I'm going to take you on some astral trips to the spirit side, to other places in the universe. I want to show you things that you should write about. I want to introduce you to people that you should have a conversation with, and I want all these to be disclosed in your second book. That was my first encounter with him in the astral form. So then he literally reached out, grabbed my astral hand, pulled my astral body out of my physical body. I turned around and could see my physical body was still sound asleep in bed, and then he took me by the hand, and we just rose up through the ceiling, up through the clouds, and orbited above a high spot above our beautiful planet for a few moments, so I could glimpse our very beautiful planet from that perspective. And then our first stop was to go through a shimmering doorway into the spirit side. So that was the beginning of my astral trips with Albert.
What were the first things that you learned? What were the big lessons that he wanted to get across to all people?
Well, he one of the first stops on the spirit side was that I met with what would be my welcoming party when I crossed over permanently, which was members of my family who crossed over, like my mother, father, brother, and various aunts and uncles and grandparents. And so the first thing was he wanted to confirm what he had told me before, was that we're all eternal beings, and that when our physical bodies die, we all cross back over to the spirit side where we came from. And so as living proof, here was my group of deceased relatives who were there. They were alive and well, and they welcomed me with open arms. So that was sort of a confirmation of what he had told me before. And then he took me to visit a white city there called Adleia, and we went before what he called the Council of Wise Ones, which is a committee of sort of very wise and advanced souls. And there I had a conversation with the chairperson, Sophia, who said she had a message to give for me to take back to my fellow humans. And it was look, humans, you're at a very advanced stage of development, but your spiritual and emotional intelligence has not kept pace. And she says what you need to do is control your negative emotions, your fear, anger, hate, greed, which causes so much strife and violence on your planet. Control that, submerge it, and embrace love and compassion. And if you can do that, you'll get over this rough part in the road that you're currently in. And if you don't, you're going to end up crashing and burning like other civilizations in Earth's past, like Lemuria and Atlantis and a number of other ones I've never heard of. So that was her very, very sort of a solemn message for me to take back to humanity, which I put in my book. So that was another very important lesson that I got right from the start.
Well, this seems to be a problem that humanity has had from the very beginning, overcoming the negativity, the violence, the corruption, the shadow side of human beings. And we don't seem to get the message. And so how is this message different? Are we approaching some sort of crisis point?
Yeah, he basically they basically said, yeah, we're at a very crucial point in our development, and they didn't give any timelines or anything, but they said, like, we really have to get our act together. We have to have more and more people embracing the message of love, compassion, and forgiveness, and trying to distance ourselves from our negative emotions. And if we can do that, then we can avoid crashing and burning. But that's not easy to do. And what they are doing, what the good people on the spirit side are doing, are blasting our planet with a lot of messages through many different channels. People like yourself, Rosemary, who host radio shows and write books, and people who speak at conferences, and people who post blogs. And the idea is to get as many people sending that message of love, compassion, and forgiveness as possible to try to wake up the rest of the people on our planet who are still sleeping.
Well, you talk in one of your books about seeing two different Earths, and one of them is the new Earth. And is this what's going to happen, is that Earth is going to kind of split in two, and the people who don't get it are going to get left behind, and the rest of us will move on?
Well, actually, Albert says that the new Earth actually, of course, time doesn't really exist outside of Earth. Linear time is just an illusion. But the new Earth actually exists at the same time as our current Earth, and it's there in a higher dimension. And the way humans can get up to the new Earth is by increasing their vibrations. They have to increase their vibrations sufficiently so that their vibration rates match that of the new Earth, and then they can just ascend. And there's been a number of humans who actually have made the ascension, but you can't increase your vibrations unless you get rid of your negative emotions, and you have to, and once you stifle those and then fully embrace love, then your vibrations will just increase, and when you hit the right rate, you'll just ascend up to the new Earth, which is really an amazing place, because Albert actually took me there to have a visit with a civilization living on the new Earth.
And what is it like?
Oh, it's like paradise. I mean, it's like the people there are very wise and compassionate, very loving. There aren't any negative emotions. People don't have to work. There's sort of everything that they need is supplied. It's just there, and they've learned to arrest the aging process. They've learned to ward off diseases and repair injured tissue. So they all live for several hundred years, and they have a very pastoral sort of way of life. They don't have a lot of technology. They don't need it, and they spend their time, studying, our Earth, studying other planets, studying, trying to gain wisdom, and pursuing recreational and artistic activities. So it's a very, very wonderful sort of existence, and without any crime or any need to work, they can just pursue whatever sort of interest they may choose to, and so it's just a wonderful place, a place that we should all aspire to get to, Rosemary.
Well, by ascending, do you mean that we take on what's called the light body form? Do we transcend death, or is this another kind of like a paraphysical, semi-physical sort of existence?
It's still a physical existence, but at a much higher vibration rate. So it's not sort of the spirit side. It's still in the physical realm, but at a much higher dimension than our Earth. Our Earth is sort of at the bottom rung of the ladder, and so this one's up higher, and it still is physical. And so the people there, their physical bodies do eventually die after a couple of hundred years, and then their souls leave their physical body and go to the spirit side, just like ours do, except that they have a much happier journey and a much happier existence while they're in the physical form.
So once we reach a new Earth status, then do we ever come back to this Earth, or have we gone through our paces, so to speak, learned our lessons, and we don't need to come back here?
Well, we don't need to come back, but some souls choose to come back to this planet and incarnate in humans, not because they need to learn anything, but because they want to help other souls on their journeys. And I've actually met one, which is disclosed in my fourth book, one lady who actually did ascend up to the new Earth, and then when that physical body died, she went to the spirit side and decided to come back to this Earth to help the people on this planet. She thought that she could really, help our cause, and so it was very noble of her to do that. But she didn't have to. She could have just stayed on the spirit side.
I just find so many amazing parallels with some of the research that I've been doing for a good number of years now, and concerning contact experiences and the Kundalini awakening, which is awakening that spiritual energy, which is part of the process of ascension. And I can certainly see some acceleration there. Research that has come out about how people are being transformed by having contact experiences. And it doesn't have to be like a near-death experience. It could even be contact with what we would call alien beings. And I have envisioned what I call the trans-reality Earth. And that our various experiences with these other dimensions are having an effect on our consciousness and moving us forward into an expanded reality that requires a certain caliber of consciousness to be able to exist in that reality. And so I think you and I are and Albert, we're all talking about the same thing, maybe just using different terminology, but it's something that is happening.
Yeah, it absolutely is. And that kind of message is coming, as I said, from many different channels. And the good thing, from my perspective, Rosemary, is that when I hear other people like yourself having similar experiences and thoughts, it just validates what Albert has told me, and so many other people are having the same kind of thoughts and experiences. So the core message coming from the source, from the spirit side, is all the same. There's just different nuances depending on the filter used by the person, the channel receiving it, but the core message is all the same.
So worst case scenario, and I don't know if Albert got into that or not. Worst case scenario, let's say humanity just doesn't get the message, doesn't do it, just stays mired in a lower level of vibration. What happens then? What's our prognosis?
Well, Albert is actually very optimistic. He says, things look fairly grim. And he said that when anyone who listens to the evening news, you get nothing but a bunch of negative news, suicide bombers and terrorist acts and so on. He says that's because the media focuses on bad news. He says there's actually a lot of good stuff going on our planet. There's a lot of good people here. And so he's very optimistic. He says he does believe that we're going to pull through, but we have a lot of work to do. But he wouldn't give any time frames, nor would the Council of Wise Ones. They refuse to do that. But we're at a very crucial point. And if we don't make it, the worst case scenario is we destroy ourselves and all other life on our planet. And guess what? Poor old Gaia has to start over right from scratch.
I don't know, maybe Gaia wants to start over from scratch. Sometimes I get that feeling, and especially with all the violent weather disasters that go on. That's one way to sweep everything out.
Exactly.
Well, this new Earth, it sounds also a lot like the afterlife. And did you find any parallels there?
Well, the parallels are that there aren't any negative emotions. There's no crime, and just lots of love. Not quite the same degree of unconditional love that there is on the spirit side, but they're getting very close to that. So that's the parallels. Where it doesn't match is the fact is that they still have physical bodies, so they have to eat, drink, sleep, and procreate, which doesn't happen on the spirit side because souls there are just beings of energy, and they don't have to do any of those things. So there's some parallels, but certainly some differences.
All right. Well, we're coming up on our first break for the evening. This is just fascinating stuff to contemplate, Garnet, and we'll be right back. We're just going to take a short break here. Do stay with us on kgraradio.com. You're listening to Strange Dimensions. And when we come back, we're going to find out about Roswell, what Jesus has had to say. How about that meeting with Lucifer, too? I'm really curious about that. So don't go away. Lots of good stuff coming up.
KGRAradio.com is your conference connection station.
Are you feeling stuck? Is there a cloud hanging over you? Are you trying to find your purpose? Are you holding on to negative energies or beliefs? If you've answered yes to any of these questions, maybe you're ready to invite light and love into your life. Visit onlinevibes.com and shop the items you'll need to bring healthy and healing vibes into your space, including smudging tools and incense, aromatherapy, crystals, divination tools, candles, natural body care products, jewelry, and lots of thoughtful gift ideas from and for the heart. Visit onlinevibes.com. That's online, VIBEZ.com for your mind, body, and spirit needs, and get your vibes on today.
You've probably heard about all the great benefits of goat milk soap, but did you know some companies take shortcuts? At Old New England Soap, we make our organic goat's milk soap using 36% goat's milk. That's 17% more than most others. Our bars are larger, so they last longer, producing lots of lather packed with vitamins. And our soap is a natural moisturizer that smooths dry and damaged skin. Order online at oldnesoap.com. That's oldnesoap.com. You've tried the rest. Now try the best. oldnesoap.com.
Water-based soaps on supermarket shelves use harsh chemical acids to break down dead skin cells. And that's just not good for you. At Old New England Soap, our soaps are made without chemical ingredients, contain no alcohol or petroleum products, and use 85% organic materials and carry the USDA's organic certification. Try some today. Go to oldnesoap.com. That's oldnesoap.com. oldnesoap.com.
Now you have the inside contact for alternative talk radio. The Planet. KGRAradio.com.
Welcome back to Strange Dimensions. My fascinating guest tonight, Garnet Schulhauser, who's been all over the multiverse in his adventures with his spirit guide, Albert, learning some really weighty and important revelations and messages for all of us here in our daily lives and the direction that we're going as a whole. We were talking about the new Earth before the break. Garnet, what about, I have to ask, let's do this now before we get into some of these important figures that you've had contact with. What about Roswell? You actually were taken to witness Roswell.
Actually, I witnessed the Roswell event in the Akashic Records on the spirit side, Rosemary, and there it was. The Akashic Records are housed in a building where there's viewing rooms, and you go in and there's a big holographic globe that sort of floats in the center. And my spirit guide Albert knew how to sort of run it, and so he basically took me back to the scenes when just before the Roswell crash. And what happened was that there was actually an alien scout craft that descended from a very large mothership, full of a very advanced alien race. And the scout craft was exploring an army weather balloon that they had put up into the air. They just went to check it out, and for whatever reason, as I'm watching the replay on the Akashic Records, they had a navigation error on their craft, and they ended up smashing into this balloon. And unfortunately, that sort of jarred some of their other avionic equipment loose, and they ended up crashing in the desert below the balloon, just near Roswell. This is 1947, and I watched as the craft sort of hit the gully and then skipped like a stone across a pond a little bit, and then came to a stop. And then I watched, and of course Albert, he could sort of fast forward and stop it and so on and so forth, just like watching a 3D movie. And I watched as the door of this little craft opened up, and I could see inside, and there were three little aliens there One of them was actually moving, trying to get out, and the other two seemed to be basically lifeless. Well, eventually the trucks and jeeps and other military personnel from the Roswell Army Air Base arrived at the scene. There had been some other humans around there who'd actually seen this craft, and they came and basically took it over, and they carried out the three little aliens. One was still alive, and they put the craft on the back of a large flatbed truck, covered it with a tarp, hauled it off to the Army Air Base, and then I followed the scene as we went to the hospital or the medical facility at the air base, and there the doctors were trying to save the one little alien that was still alive. Unfortunately, they couldn't, and so they ended up basically embalming in preservative fluid all three of the little aliens, and they took the spacecraft, and those three aliens eventually ended up in Area 51 in Nevada, where they still are. And so far, according to Albert, our engineers have not been able to figure out sort of what made the craft operate and how it maneuvered and so on. But they're still there. And of course, there's a lot of speculation about what's in Area 51. But at least that craft and those three little aliens are there. And when the government officials decided to cover up the fact that it was an alien craft, they showed the remains of this weather balloon and said it wasn't an alien spacecraft, it was this weather balloon that crashed. Well, they were right. The weather balloon did crash after it collided with this little scout craft, but they didn't tell the whole story, which was there actually was an alien scout craft that had crashed and was squirreled away to Area 51. So it was a big cover-up from very high sources. It's been covered up ever since, like all the other UFO sightings. But it was a very fascinating picture for me because I had read about the Roswell crash years ago, and I was very fascinated to actually see what happened in the Akashic records.
I've always believed that an alien craft came down at Roswell, and that's fascinating about the weather balloon, too. So the story's partially right. Do you think that in terms of Earth investigation, you were able to see things from a different perspective, but do you think we'll ever get to the bottom of it?
Oh, absolutely. Albert says, of course, our planet's been visited by ETs for years and years, and they're very advanced, many different races. They're very benevolent, Albert says, and he says that at some point there will be full and open disclosure about the fact that Earth has been visited by advanced civilizations. But he says the time is not right yet, and he wouldn't say when it would happen, but he said sometime in the future there will be full and open disclosure. In the meantime, there's been more and more sightings of UFO crafts and more stories of abductions and so on. And what he says, what they're doing is they're sort of laying the groundwork to the public, getting them sort of prepped for the fact that eventually there will be full and open disclosure. And it just seems like it's sort of a gradual process that's increasing. Every year we hear more and more of these stories. And one of these days they're just going to sort of hover over the White House and say, guess what? Here we are.
Well, that ought to make Stephen Bassett very happy. He's been, campaigning for full disclosure for a very long time, yeah. And I've of a mind that it's happening kind of gradually from the ground up. So I guess we'll just have to stay tuned and see how that bears out. I want to move on to. As fascinating as Roswell is, I want to move on to some of the religious figures that you had contact with. And you talk about the secret life of Jesus. You actually sat down and had a conversation with him. What did you learn about him?
Well, he's a very fascinating soul, very wise and compassionate, loving soul. He's a master soul, he told me, which means that he's got very sort of advanced powers. He said that he incarnated on our planet not because he needed to learn or experience anything himself, but he came here to help humans. And he thought that humans needed to have a little bit of a leadership to follow in terms of getting them out of the mire they were in and trying to take the next step up the spiritual ladder. So he incarnated on Earth over 2,000 years ago as Jesus Christ the human. And because he was a master soul, he had the ability to focus his thoughts into very powerful beams of energy. And that's how he created his miracles, walking on water, turning water into wine, raising people from the dead. He said he did this to draw attention to himself because he wanted to gather as many followers as possible so that they would hear his message of love, hope, forgiveness, and the more people that heard his message, hopefully, the more they would follow what he was preaching and lead other people to follow him as well. And so that was his purpose of coming to earth. I said to him, well, if you could create these miracles, why did you let yourself be crucified on the cross? He said he could have stopped that. He could have prevented that, but he chose not to because he felt that his death on the cross and then his subsequent ascension, resurrection, would have made a very dramatic statement for his followers, not just the ones in his lifetime, but in centuries to follow. And so he allowed that to happen. And I said, so you were basically the originator of the Christian church, obviously. How do you think it's panned out since you walked on the earth? And he says, well, the core message is still there that I taught, and that core message is still good. But he says that the leaders of the church that followed him, all the various popes and cardinals, over the centuries, in many cases they were misguided, following their own earthly agendas in search of power and control over the masses, and so they sort of got off track in a number of places. And he said, well, that's just the way it goes. You never know where humans are going to go. And he said that he assumed that somebody would form a religion based on his teachings. He didn't know how it would go. And he was said, c'est la vie. That's the way it is. And, I'm not happy with everything, but for the most part, they've done a fairly good job. So very interesting conversation.
Well, and you did make the point in one of your books about how the church has really turned God, the source, into something other than what it really is, that God is not a vindictive, judgmental kind of being. And this is the edifice of the church that's done that.
Absolutely. And that's what I was taught, was that God was sort of like this old man with a beard sitting on a gold throne in the sky. And he was making a bunch of rules for us to follow, which were really created by men, not by God. And that if you crossed God, you should feel badly about it if you didn't follow his rules, and if you didn't make amends and you did things that they called sins, you'd appear before God when you died. And if you were good, you'd go to heaven. If you're bad, you'd go to an awful place called hell. So that's how the church envisioned God, which is just totally wrong, because Albert says the source is nothing but pure, unconditional, amazing love. The source is the source of all love, and the source does not make rules for us to follow, does not control events on our planet, and does not judge us or punish us when we leave this earth and go back to the spirit side. So it's a totally different picture, and I much rather prefer the vision of the source that Albert portrayed for me than the one I was taught as a child. So the source, and much different from how the church preached to me as a child about God.
Well, that's one thing that I've been finding in the contact research that I've been doing with the Foundation for Research into Extraterrestrial Encounters, that people feel that they are becoming more spiritual but less religious, that the organization dogma of the major religions, that they just don't relate to it much anymore, but yet they feel intensely spiritual. Do you think that's part of the process of evolving into this new earth? Absolutely.
And Albert says the process has been going on for quite a while. It's been picking up the pace in the last 30 or 40 years. In fact, the last 10 or 15 years, it's becoming, it's been progressing at a geometrical pace, according to Albert. He said that 30 or 40 years ago, I would not have written my books, and if I had, nobody would have read them, and you wouldn't have had me on your radio show. But now there's more people who are spiritually aware, more people who have their minds open to spirituality and the concepts that you and I have been talking about tonight. And so we're making great progress. And a lot of those same people who are spiritual were probably raised in a religious background, and they've likely rejected a lot of that and are saying, no, I want to sort of embrace spirit, and I want to forget about all those man-made rules and beliefs and dogmas that the Catholic Church and the Christian Church and various other organized religions have been preaching for centuries. They're just outdated and they're out of place.
Do you get much pushback from religious authorities or organizations for your messages?
Not by organizations themselves. I get pushback from people who are still Christians or Catholics. I get, I get some very almost hateful, hurtful emails from time to time or messages on Facebook. But I just ignore that, and I think, well, okay, everyone's entitled to their own belief, and if you want to stick with the Christian beliefs, then you're certainly entitled to it. And when people confront me personally, I say, go ahead and believe whatever you feel comfortable with. But at the end of the day, when we're both dead, we'll both know who is telling the truth.
Very good point and well said. And it is unfortunate that and that's the negative side. That's the low side that comes out. People get defensive. They get angry. And it is very hurtful. I did like what you had to say about thought. And you made the comment that Jesus marshaled and focused his thoughts in order to create miracles. And people do not fully grasp how incredibly powerful thought is.
Absolutely. I mean, Albert said thought is really energy. And so when you're thinking, you're sending out waves of energy into the universe. And those waves of energy interact with other energy and other matter in the universe. And so, when you're walking down the street and you're having a conversation with yourself, you're really having a conversation with the universe, because all thoughts just emanate. And the more focused thoughts are more powerful than scattered thoughts, just like a laser beam is more powerful than the beam of a flashlight. And so if you're really good at focusing your thoughts, you can accomplish a whole lot more through that energy than if you're just sort of randomly thinking about things here and there. And Jesus was an example. He had very focused thoughts, so he could really manipulate matter and energy in the way that he wanted to. So we all have that capability, except that most of the time we can't be bothered to focus our thoughts, and we haven't sort of learned to condition ourselves to use our brain in a sort of a larger fashion to get to the place where, say, Jesus was, and we're certainly all capable of doing that, but most of us haven't gotten there.
While you were talking with Jesus, he introduced you to a friend of his, and it's not a friend that any of us would automatically think of.
Yes, my first meeting with Jesus was he was sitting on a bench beside, guess who, Adolf Hitler. And I thought the two of them were having a very friendly conversation, and I was sort of taken aback because, I mean, everyone knows Hitler was an incredible, an evil monster. And so I had a conversation with Hitler, and he was, he was sitting there in his military uniform, so I could recognize him. Then he immediately morphed into his normal appearance on the spirit side, which is a very handsome young man named David. And he said, "Yeah, I lived my last life as Adolf Hitler. I'm horribly sorry about what I did, all the evil and cruelty and deaths I caused." He was very sorry for it. He said that he didn't plan to do all that sort of stuff. He planned to be born into the body of Adolf Hitler. He planned to get into politics, but he didn't know where it would lead. And he said all the bad things happened because his negative emotions, like fear, anger, hate, greed, got totally out of control. And we all know what happened. The rest is history. And he was very sorry for that. But he said that one of the things which may surprise a lot of people is that he had met with many of the members of the people who died in his death camps on the spirit side. And he said there's been total reconciliation, because he says when you cross over to the spirit side from your earthly incarnation, you don't carry over any hatred or animosity or desire for revenge, because once you get there, there's nothing but unconditional love. So they unconditionally loved him, and he unconditionally loved them. Now, a lot of people will choke on that, but he says that's just the reality. And he also said that he couldn't wait. He was really quite eager to get back into another incarnation on Earth to try to make up some of the negative karma he accumulated in this life. And he knew that there was a huge amount of karma he had to negate, but he was really keen to do that. And he really hoped that the next time he would do much better. And so, he was really quite keen to make amends. So quite amazing. It was sort of like, here you have the paragon of virtue and and an evil monster sitting there side by side, having a very friendly conversation. And Jesus said they often got together to discuss their lives on Earth.
Well, that's something that would certainly raise the eyebrows of a lot of people. Do you think Hitler's being punished in any way for all the things he did?
No, because there is no punishment. There is no punishment in the afterlife. Everyone, no matter if you're an evil monster, a murderer, a suicide bomber, they all go back to the spirit side, and he, it's hard for people to swallow a lot of this, but Albert says it's like you have to look at it like the people on the spirit side do, is that life on earth is like being in a play. And if you're in a play in Broadway and the script calls for you, Rosemary, to stab and kill another actor, when the curtain goes down and you leave the theater, you don't get arrested by the police for murder because it didn't really happen. And the actor that you stabbed on the stage doesn't hate you. In fact, you probably are still best friends. So that's how souls on the spirit side view life on earth. It's like, okay, in this life, you're the bad guy and I'm the good guy. And in a previous life, our rules were reversed. And so we're going through various sort of scripts that we planned for ourselves beforehand. But it doesn't really count. It's not for keeps. Nothing on earth is for keeps because it's only there for us to learn and experience things. And once we get back to the spirit side, we're back to where we are in unconditional love, and we have no sort of carryover of negative emotions. So that's how Albert explained it to me. He said, you may not understand it now, but you will once you cross over to the spirit side permanently, and you'll see the whole picture.
And that's a perspective that I think is hard for a lot of people to understand because most people understandably think that someone who does something heinous and bad deserves to be punished. And the idea that there is no extreme punishment for extreme act, but a rehabilitation process. I do believe in rehabilitation myself. That's a big step for a lot of folks, but it's a very important spiritual lesson. Closing in on our last few minutes here, but I got to hear about Lucifer, Garnet. What did he have to say?
Well, Albert surprised me because he said, we were on the spirit side, and he said, I want to take you to meet Lucifer. And I was taken aback because Albert had told me previously that Satan did not exist. It was invented by religious organizations. There was no Satan. And so I thought, well, are you pulling my leg or what's going on here? So anyway, we went to meet Lucifer. He was a very beautiful, kind, gentle, compassionate angel, a very, 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 very nice person. Nothing like the Prince of Darkness or the personification of evil that had been that humans have ascribed to him, over the centuries. And he said that he's been badly maligned by some humans as being sort of the alter ego of the devil. And he said, but in reality, it's totally the opposite. He said that he spends his time as an angel, as a sort of a delegate of the source, to try to stomp off, prevent evil deeds, evil happenings on our planet. And he does that by sending strong sort of intuitional messages, bombarding people at the right place at the right time to get them to prevent evil or stop doing some heinous acts. And he actually mentioned a few examples. He said that he spent a lot of time persuading Abraham Lincoln to abolish slavery. And he mentioned that during the Second World War, he spent a lot of time bombarding the Nazi scientists who were developing the A-bomb for Hitler, bombarding them with the message that they needed to drag their feet so the bomb would not be available for Hitler before the end of the war. And then here's one that you may be too young to remember this event, but in 1962, during the Cuban Missile Crisis, when President Kennedy decided to do a naval blockade around Cuba to prevent Russia from setting up missile silos on 90 miles away from Florida, he said that he bombarded the Soviet leader Nikita Khrushchev with messages that prevented him from pushing the button to start World War III. Anyway, that's what he said that he was instrumental in doing, and he says he continues to try to prevent evil wherever he can, but he says obviously because there's still a lot of evil deeds happening on our planet that he doesn't always succeed, but he's still there trying. And so he's really very much 180-degree opposite from how people have construed him over the years as being the devil.
Can't he do something about his image then?
I think he's trying, but it just hasn't worked so far.
We have a lot of folks out there who are oriented to the dark side who think, he's the top guy of death, destruction, and chaos. This is...
he's totally the opposite. Yeah.
So actually, he's fulfilling more the role that we would ascribe to the good angels.
Yes, and he's very much of a good angel. He's very benevolent. He's not a fallen angel. He's just been badly maligned for whatever reason by some humans centuries ago, and that's been carried forward. And he's he seemed a bit hurt by the whole connotation that he'd been having to live with, but he's sort of resigned himself to the fact that it doesn't really matter what you think of me. I'm still there behind the scenes trying to stop evil, not create it.
Do you think that Lucifer can ever be rehabilitated in our view, in Western view, in Christianity?
Yeah, I'm not sure about that. I think there's as time goes on, there's going to be less and less emphasis on Satan, devil, Lucifer, that kind of thing. I think people are going to sort of become spiritually aware and recognize that those creatures are just inventions by religious organizations to control people through fear. And I think more and more people are realizing that, and I think after a number of years, it'll just be sort of a lost chapter in history, and nobody will even focus on it.
So what advice would you have for the average person out there who, this is like news to them that Lucifer's not really the bad guy? What advice would you have for how they should regard him? What perspective should we put Lucifer in?
We should regard him as being a benevolent angel, because in reality there are no evil spirits, there are no evil entities, there are no demons, and so you have to sort of get your head out of that sort of area and recognize that all spirits are inherently good and loving, and it's only bad things happen when they incarnate on our planet and forget where they came from, and forget about all the unconditional love that they had on the other side, and it's here on Earth. Humans with their negative emotions that create all the problems, and so there just aren't any evil spirits, and so all angels are good angels. There are no bad angels, and it's hard for people to wrap their minds around that, Rosemary, but that's just the reality, and I think that eventually more and more people will come around.
Well, Garnet, I'm afraid we're at the end of our time tonight, and so many topics that you have written about that we could easily spend a whole show on almost all of them. I want to thank you so much for being on with me tonight. You've got a new book coming out this summer. What's the title, and when will that be out?
The title is Dance of Eternal Rapture, and it's more astral adventures with my spirit guide, Albert. I meet many different people, go to many different places. It's all very fascinating, and every place I go to, every person I meet, there's a lesson for humanity or a nugget of wisdom for all of us to comprehend. And it should be out. I don't have an exact timetable, but it should be out this summer or early fall. And so it'll be the sort of the fourth book in the Dancing with Albert tetralogy.
Definitely want to have you come back on and pick up the thread. GarnetSchulhauser.com is the website to go to for information. You've been listening to Strange Dimensions on KGRA Digital Broadcasting Radio. Right now, in just a few minutes, don't go away, because Fade to Black with Jimmy Church is coming right up. See you next week, and see you on down that paranormal road.